It's a beautiful thing that happens with humans when we take that small step of just connecting instead of shrinking.
Welcome, everyone, to the Driving Vision podcast brought to you by the Zeigler Auto Group. I'm your host, Sam Dark. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast, like it if you do, and leave a comment.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the special edition of the Driving Vision Future of Zag Today podcast. And back with us again today, obviously, Ariah Daniels. Welcome.
Thank you, Sam. Glad to be here.
VP Talent Development. But Tim Terrentine with Translators Consulting Group.
That's right.
Right? Yes, I got it.
He got it. Yeah.
So, Tim, it was awesome because I wasn't expecting to see you today. I was up here recording some stuff, had an internet outage, which we've got to get to the bottom of. And I came and was able to sit in on your classroom. It was an absolute delight because I don't often get to sit in on the classes.
It was fun to have me.
What a cool conversation. And let's just get into it. Courage.
Courage was the call of the day.
Ariah, what does courage mean to you after today?
You know, courage really is synonymous with me with confidence. And so when I think about being courageous, being confident, so I'm really excited to dive into some of the really big points that we hit on for this class today.
Yeah. How would you define courage? How did you define courage today, Tim?
Well, we shared lots of definitions, but at the end of the day, it's really about taking the next small step.
Yeah.
Right? That in life, when we need courage, it's all about what's the next small thing I can do, right? Because I think it's just become such a big target for so many of us that if we can't solve the scariest thing, if we can't climb the biggest mountain, we're somehow a failure. But the truth is, sometimes courage is just getting up in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes it's not hitting send,
Yeah.
right? And so we have so many ways we can be courageous without some big, celebration. So what we try to do is make courage real for people at work and explore the ways we can show up courageously.
It's interesting because I've thought a lot recently. I don't know why this came up in my world past several weeks, months, whatever, but there are moments in our lives, personal and business, where you feel that tension in your chest. You start to feel nervous. You start to sweat a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, this is a decisive moment. Like, if I have courage and I say what I know I should say, I act how I know I should act, in that moment, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge and uncomfortable. But if I don't, that's going to stick with me.
Yeah.
Longer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Fair?
Talk about leaving the comfort zone. That was a huge topic of conversation today, is that leaving that comfort zone takes courage.
It takes courage.
Right? Yeah. And to your point, like holding on to that feeling, that tension in your chest, you can choose to whether you're going to get through that moment and work through that comfort zone or the other side of that, or continue to deal with whatever's going on there.
Yeah.
Like,
so you've talked to a lot of our teams as you've gone around the group. So you've been here in Kalamazoo, Granville, I think, and in the Chicagoland. What are some examples of moments where team members have needed to exhibit courage to do something difficult where it's ultimately turned out well?
Yeah, I think what I heard a lot so far today was feedback, right? When we need to speak up, not to put anybody down or blow anything up, but to just help us get back in the groove.
Yeah.
Sometimes, the war of attrition, you're working hard, you're working fast, clients are all over the place for everybody. We have to work across teams. Sometimes we drift. So just being able to lift my voice in a meeting to help us redirect seems like a small act, but think of how many meetings we sit in where the majority of the room is silent. And everybody knows somebody should say something, right? So it's not necessarily some big, overwhelming thing.
So, but you can't just be reckless with courage. Courage also does it require integrity or a little bit of heart? Like, you can't just throw a bomb out in a meeting. It's not going to help it.
we did talk about that today. We had someone say, hey, have you ever been in a meeting where one person will say what everyone's thinking? And then you do it, and then everyone else gets the courage to speak up and talk about the same topic. So I think there are calculated risks that you choose to take in those moments, and it's got to be at the right time. And we talked about that today too, like being able to have the courage in those moments where you feel like, okay, it's time.
Well, and part of that is how you prepare for courage.
How do you prepare?
Well, it's like a muscle.
Okay.
Right? You have to work out so that you have the strength you need when you need it. And that's a big, like for instance, one of the points of working out is to play out the scenarios. So in that meeting where I have to speak up, I can think to myself, what's the worst that could happen if I raised my hand? And then the other consideration is, what happens if I don't? What happens to my team? What happens to me? What happens to our efficiency? What happens to our relationships if I do nothing? Right? Another one that we talked about was taking care of my body. So we all have stressful moments and things we know we have to face. There's meetings on the calendar. There's end of the month things that come every month.
So what does taking care of your body have to do with courage?
Well, I said it's equal fitness.
Have to do with courage.
Was not just fitness. It's sleep. It's rest. It's mindfulness. It's taking. I hear you don't like this time.
Sleeping. Yeah, this is a problem for me.
Rest, man, because courage requires us to do something we're not typically doing. And in some cases, I'm actually doing the opposite of what I'm afraid of. I can't do that on an empty tank.
Yeah, that is interesting because when we're sleep deficient, there's that whole fight or flight, right?
Yes.
Those moments of courage often, to a lot of us, either trigger a flight or they trigger an aggressive fight.
That's right.
Courage isn't going into a meeting room and picking a fight. Maybe that's what I meant earlier. Like you have to come into that meeting with the right heart to speak with courage. Because if you come in with the wrong heart and you speak with courage, you could say something truly offensive that could hurt a team. Oh, and then ultimately could damage what you're trying. You talk about that preparation. How can the wrong preparation lead to damage in the team?
Well, courage is tied to values.
Okay.
And that's why I think particularly in the Zeigler context, you all really do push your values as a company.
Yeah.
And you talk about it. Because people can be courageous and tear people down. Well, we still have an end game.
Yeah, that's not.
And so what's driving your courage?
So where's the line? Okay.
Yeah, right. What's driving your courage? What are your values?
What are my motivations?
What is your culture?
Yeah.
Right. So if the culture, for instance, some companies I work with, the innovation is a big deal. We want all the ideas. We want to be creative. But people can't speak up.
Yeah.
People can't bring new ideas without fear of being torn down.
Yeah.
Right. And so we have to create environments where courage helps our mission.
So I'm going to put Ariah on the spot. So Ariah did an interesting process over the past many months. You went around to many of the stores and you did culture surveys, right? Yeah. Culture surveys are a good example of a time and a place where you want to say everything, but you have to come with courage. You have to be courageous. So you have to know, sharing everything doesn't necessarily always help.
Hi.
What's your perspective on these culture surveys and to you as a leader, what's the most helpful feedback you get in those that builds the team, builds the culture, not tear it apart?
Yeah, sure. So, when we're speaking specifically about our culture surveys and that process that we do, we're inviting people to come in and bring us those ideas. So they're coming in and we're expecting them to give us information, right? We want that. And so I think creating a safe space to allow them to do that gives them the courage to speak.
To create a space.
Sure. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Is all of it helpful? And then how do you as a leader redirect to help create?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I am a big believer that everyone's feelings are valid regardless, right? So if someone feels something or if they've got an opinion about something, whatever in their experiences that they've had inside the workforce, they're valid. So we help really dissect what they're trying to say and say, hey, is there a solution to this? And if it's something where they're just trying to nitpick and or create drama, then it's easy to kind of put a kibosh to some of those things. But ultimately, I always try to remind myself is that someone's got an opinion about something because they have struggled with something or they've gone through an experience at work that allows them to have that feeling and be valid. So it's an interesting dynamic when we sit through and create what are the actions now that we're going to do to fix those pieces of culture. Yeah. But still giving everyone the amount of courage and safe space to speak up regardless. That's the reason why we do that. So.
Does well-placed courage create drama, Tim?
Well, it can. You're dealing with humans. They're very complex and unpredictable.
All right, you're laughing like that's...
No, I'm serious because some people, and this is what is the beauty and the burden of humanity, is that we come in all flavors. and all temperatures at any given time. It's a courageous act to ask for feedback
Yeah.
Oh,
as a company.
If it can be delivered differently is what we're saying.
I applaud you, by the way. It took courage because you and Mike basically said, hey, you know what? We've always had this process. We've always kind of sent out the survey. You dared to walk into stores that hadn't been asked that question for a long time and then take the answer.
Oh, yeah.
And it also takes courage to hear it unvarnished.
Yes.
And it also takes courage to sort through it and kind of figure out what is, it's all actionable, but it's not all necessarily equally actionable, right?
Yeah, sure.
Part of it is development and helping each other. So that's interesting. What's the opposite of courage?
That's a great question. Well, most people, and I asked the class, they're like, what's the opposite? And I heard laziness. I did. I said, what's the opposite? And they said laziness. They said cowardice. They said fear.
I would say fear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually worse than that.
Passive aggressive.
It's indifference.
Ooh.
The opposite of courage and worse than cowardice is when we don't care. When we stop trying.
Yeah.
Right? And I told the class, and I'll say it here, I have to admit, I've let myself get there on things that are important to me, right? Missions that are important to me. I'm overwhelmed, I'm burdened, I'm upset, I'm tired, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I just say, forget it. And I make something that is really important not mean anything to me. Indifference, it don't make a difference to me, right? And that's the opposite of courage.
I love that, by the way, because we see that. You know what? You can attempt to have courage over and over and over again. And if you're not met by a reaction, that can sometimes lead to indifference because you don't think you can make a difference or impact. So if I'm in a place of emotional indifference and we're getting deep now. We're going deep. Become indifferent, and I know I need to exhibit courage as a leader. How do I get myself back from indifference?
That's
Sure.
Yeah.
One of the points I made today was connect, don't constrict. When I want to give in and go into my cave of I don't care, that's not the time to constrict, to get smaller. That's the time to reach out and connect. That's the time to make connections, to reach out to mentors, connect, don't constrict, right? Reach out,
Connect.
don't close in. There you go. That's it. And so as leaders, it's a lonely job. And we're so used to having to try to have the answers that a lot of times we just go into a cave.
Yeah.
And the truth is, we all need somebody. And actually, courage is contagious. So if I go to people who are courageous in the moment I'm ready to shut down, I can borrow from yours. I can borrow from Ariah's, and I can get my groove back just through connecting. It's a beautiful thing that happens with humans when we take that small step of just connecting instead of shrinking.
I love that. Ariah, so I'm going to have courage here for a minute to bring up something tell us about the group you lead.
For which one?
For women.
Yeah. Okay. So we just actually over the last 6 months started a new leadership group inside Zeigler Auto Group called Women Leaders of the ZAG. Yeah. And this was something that I had on my heart for a while, to create a space for the females of the organization to come together and learn from each other. Conversations are just a little bit different and be able to connect that way.
When Tim says connect, don't constrict.
Yeah.
I wonder if sometimes, you've made us aware of some of the differences and challenges. Are there situations where women in our automotive industry might constrict, might kind of give up their voice, maybe become indifferent because they're not heard in the same way?
Yeah.
Do you see that?
Yeah.
How would this?
No, but not even, I don't even want to put, a label on women. I think it's anyone and everyone, right? Like I think anyone in the organization, we talked about a couple of examples today where people might see an idea to fix a process and make it a little bit more streamlined. Yeah. But because it's always the way that it's been,
right. Yep.
People are afraid or don't have the courage to speak up to say, hey, this could be different.
Yeah.
And so I think we see that all the time to build that courage up to jump in and say, hey, I've got something different. Let's do it this way. Let's try it out. And that's a risk.
So to members of your group, if they feel that need to constrict, what would you tell them?
So connect. Yeah.
Take it back.
And I think
constricting, it comes from a moment of fear, right?
Yeah.
And a moment of deafness, right?
Well, it's protection.
Yeah.
Protect those.
What would you tell your?
Well, I think in just connecting, exactly what Tim is saying, I think when you get to the point of feeling indifferent about things, instead of like cowering back and saying, oh, I can't change this or I can't do this, I would encourage people to start connecting with others around you to say, hey, like, what does this look like? How do you feel about this? How can I feed off some of the energy that you can give me to go give some courage to make a change somewhere?
That's right.
Yeah.
We call it small is all.
Wait, what does that mean? What does small as all mean?
When I need to be courageous, I just need to think of what I can do on the micro level to be courageous.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Instead of sending that Teams message,
Yeah.
I might get up and walk to talk to the person so I get some understanding. Right? Like sometimes it's just a small act. And what we do in the small scale sets the stage for the whole thing. So if we can get people doing small, courageous acts, we're not acting anymore. It's a part of our culture. It's who we are. We just are courageous as a team because we do it in the small.
We related it to exercise today and calling progressive overload. So, if someone's got a goal that they want to lose 100 pounds, right? That's a pretty big goal. And so what do? You start small. You start with those small things. It's the same exact thing in concept of courage. Like when you are working at those small pieces of courage to help get to the bigger courage, that's the concept.
Small is all. And it's amazing in the class. When I ask people to list small acts of courage that they've done in the workplace, somehow we had a room full of responses. So it's not that we don't know how to do courage. What we got to do, and what I hope this class has done and is doing, is helping people access it more consistently. Because we all have had courageous moments where we did step up, and we know how that feels.
So can I give you some concrete examples? So I was in the room. Thank you for allowing me to be there for a little bit. And I had the sticky note. We all wrote something down.
Yeah.
What's an example of courage? I wrote down, and I think Ariah and I actually had a similar one, right? It's like change, right? And so when something's just been done the same way forever, like it's tough to change sometimes. It's risk. You got to get everybody on board with the vision, whatever. At my table was an assistant service writer at the Boyle. And he said, hey, my moment of courage needs to be, he hadn't done it yet, finding ways to connect with customers, to speak up and speak out on behalf of customers. And I thought about that. I'm like, that's cool. Because that's to us might seem easy.
Yeah.
Right. To him, it's terrifying because he's newer.
Right.
Everybody at the table kind of gathered around him and said it's newer. I love that you had everybody say a thing, because then after they said that thing, everybody kind of gathered around and gave him support. Yeah. And I don't know if he went back and did it. I mean, we'll know after today, I guess. But that one little thing delivers on our mission statement, the ultimate automotive experience. Ariah, did you see anything at your table?
Yeah. Oh gosh, there were some funny ones, but a lot of the ones that we talked about had something to do with the idea of change, where like someone had seen a process look some way and they felt like they were having a hard time finding the courage to speak up, to challenge that.
Yeah.
So little things like that, just in processes, I think.
Sometimes courage is saying it and then getting shot down and still continuing to have courage, right? Because courage is not always going to be met successfully.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Is it?
No. Not every chance is going to work out the way you imagine.
No.
And that's important, and there's real feelings around it, but that ain't the point.
Yeah.
The point is, were you courageous?
Yeah. All right. So if I'm listening to this podcast,
Yes.
and I'm hearing like courage, I get it. Taking the risk, I get it. Doing something that I know I should do or could do or need to do, taking that small step. What advice would you give to people listening across the Zeigler Auto Group? Do you have like some sort of a courage assessment? Like what's the thing that I could rally myself to do to get myself up and excited about it? And then here's the challenge. We want to hear. So email us at the podcast and tell us what you've done that took courage and what was the ripple in the pond that it created. So give us some steps.
You had us remind ourselves what were the things that our talents and or our lived experiences help us find courage.
That's it.
We kind of, so I said positivity. I'm a positive person. I'm always looking for glass half full. I'm also resilient. I feel like I use a lot of my lived experiences, whether it was trauma or whatever it was, right? To know, oh, hey, I got through that thing. I'm more resilient. And now I can get through this next thing, which is taking the courage to do X, Y, Z, right? So having us do that exercise where we're defining what were the talents that we have that help us become courageous and or lived experience.
So step one could be taking a personal inventory.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that thing yourself, when you did that exercise at the table, people were asking each other, what do you feel like gives me the courage to do that tough thing, right? What's your thing?
Oh, I've got a few of them. I think resilience is one of them, right? That idea that we can keep coming and get through. There's just something about me. And it comes both from my family. I grew up in a family of 6, right? And then there's other things about my past that have said, hey, you're going to get knocked down. You're not going to feel so great, but march on, right? And so that's, when you ask me about steps, it's really about who am I and what is needed. What am I bringing and what do we need?
And then you just got to take the action, right?
The next small, right, pleasure. Again, we're not trying to boil the ocean. What we're trying to do is get closer to courage. One step, one move at a time.
So I think a culture can help celebrate. Now, I'm going to give you the answer for mine. I think one of mine, optimism, I think is,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I think a little bit, and not in a religious sense, but faith, that always at the end of the challenge is potential for something.
Yeah.
That's right.
Like, I don't know why it is. I have this bizarre optimism that it's always going to be okay at the end, even though in the deepest, darkest moments, it's not, right? And I don't know why that is, but I'm grateful for that. So teams have culture, then celebrate courage. And I think at the Zeigler Auto Group, we do that. I think about being on calls where someone says something. I think, and others rally to that person behind the scenes to say, hey, great job. That was an incredible comment. Thank you for saying that and doing that. What role does culture have in supporting courage and helping to develop? Because courage is a muscle, after all, right? Like, it's something you've got to continually exercise. Otherwise, it dies and goes away in indifference, right? What role does culture have?
Do you want to talk about that?
No,
Well, because I think for me, courage is at the center of culture, because courage is connected to culture.
Yeah.
Right? That if people are afraid to lift up a different idea without fear of retribution, that's your culture. Right?
If people are afraid to lift up a different idea.
Yeah, that's your culture. It's a fear-based culture. Whether you talked about courage or not, it is your culture. And so, but if on the other side, if there is space for people to bring up an idea, give feedback, receive feedback, we got channels for all that, this, without the was being killed, without the retribution, right? Then that's your culture. Courageous.
Can I give you another benefit, I think, as I was just connecting this in my head? I think at our auto group, there is a quick connection between an idea and execution. Is there a nexus between saying something and doing something in a culture of courage? Because there are cultures where people will talk all the time and nobody will ever execute. It seems to me there's some sort of a connection between execution and courage, right?
Depends on the situation. Okay. Depends on the stakes, right? I think it's a every situation kind of thing. I don't think there's a one size fits all, but there is a one step takes all, and just that's the next right one, right? Whenever that small next courageous step is.
Yeah.
And that's situational.
Yeah.
Right.
So, Ariah, what have you seen examples of teams celebrating courage within our culture?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, even just going back to the culture surveys, right? When we come to the end and we create action items.
Yeah.
And then to see them executed, like after a few months, we can check in just to see, hey, how's the store doing? What are the processes they have? You know, we do. I mean, a lot of it is just by conversation and like spending time in the store, and you can see those changes happening, which is really cool. So it's not even like we need to do another reassessment. It's just you just see the change. And so for people to be courageous to speak up about making that change and then seeing it executed. Yeah. You definitely feel that. And that's the whole part of doing those cultures.
So someone at my table today said, courage for me is taking criticism. And I think about in a culture survey at GM, and we have GMs that have had brutal surveys.
Yeah.
And they've been humble enough and they've had courage enough to teach that.
All of us have to have it.
Oh, yeah.
You have to have
to grow.
If you don't, in this environment, you go backwards. There's no staying still, right? Not only is the environment we're working in changing, the way people feel about that is changing, right? And so that being able to courageously open those environments for people to bring their gifts, bring the genius, bring the ideas, that is a courageous act that if the organization is thinking about it, leaders are thinking about it,
Yeah.
the change can happen.
So as we near wrapping here, last couple of questions. I always like to step back and ask this question. We're an auto group. We sell cars, 4,000 cars a month-ish. We service a heck of a lot of cars. Why on earth is an auto group sitting around taking time out of car sales and service people's day to talk about courage? I mean, that's insane, right? Why?
Well, I would argue it's insane not to.
Yeah.
But most auto groups don't. To those that are listening to this,
Yeah.
this is probably a fresh breath of fresh air, because a lot of places kind of ignore this. It feels weird.
I would encourage them to take the courageous step and start learning, right? Because let me ask you this, what role is fear and indifference playing on your bottom line?
Yeah.
How much time are you spending on the fruits of that, right? How much do we miss not getting people's ideas and genius, right? I would just ask some follow-up questions. I hear you that the 2 hours you spend on a courage class, it's cost you.
Yeah, you're
Right?
selling that car.
Yeah.
You're not servicing that car.
How many hours you spend on the heat dealing with when there isn't courage? It's much more than those 2 hours, I can guarantee you.
Yeah.
Right.
So on that note, how do people reach out to you? And we have you to ourselves in the auto space, so no fair competition. They can't touch you. I'm kidding. They're right.
That ain't right, Sam. That ain't right.
But how do they get a hold of you?
So translatorscg.com and on Instagram, translatorscg. And we're reaching out to folks and we're engaging with groups about these topics.
Yeah.
The topics that are taboo, but are important. Courage, resilience, communication, conflict, the things that really move our business, but we don't talk about.
It sure makes you think. And I love being in a room with other teammates of all different roles. I mean, we had GMs, we had sales managers, we had porters, we had everybody's learning together. It shows a certain amount of humility that, you don't have a GM saying, well, I'm not going to waste my time on that. Or a salesperson saying, hey, I sell 98 cars a month. I don't need this. We all come together in that locker room and we learn together. And there's just something pretty cool about that. And thank you. So this month you're doing courage. Last go around, we had you here.
Resilience.
Resilience. It was resilience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's up next?
Well, we're figuring that out now because you all are doing some cool things with culture into the new year. And so my work will be to really support and double down through learning on the concepts you all are going to be launching. And
Do you have any hook, Ariah? Anything?
It's gonna be surrounding probably some vision and goal setting, having a vision for the year, different things like that. So that's 2025. We're gonna have the courage to make a choice to step up in new and bigger ways. So yeah.
it's going to be fun.
Well, we appreciate you being here. We appreciate you being on the podcast. Heck of a lot of fun. Ariah, you get the last word.
Oh man. I'm gonna repeat what I literally just said. Courage is a choice. Courage is a daily choice. You get to choose to show up courageously every single day and share that with others. So it's contagious. So I'd encourage Team Zeigler and everyone else listening, share that courage with others.
Well said. Thank you, Ariah. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thanks to all who participated in this week's podcast. Until next week, remember, you are the future of Zag today.